Years of innovation behind it, Baylor has driven progress in health and medicine through research, education, and care that push the frontiers of modern science.
With the summer heat, you got the 30% chance of some afternoon showers. Could see some on your drive home, similar to what we had yesterday, with some heavy stuff moving from west to east, and a little bit last night as well. 97 for the high, 79 for the low tonight, 96 for Thursday. Slight chance of rain tomorrow, Friday, 50 shot of rain for Saturday and Sunday. Right now, 82 Crosby on the northeast side, 81 here at the University of Houston. Listen anywhere we're streaming live online. It's KUHF Houston News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston. Houston Matters starts right now. Stick around, 9 o'clock.
Elected officials and immigrant rights organizations are calling for an independent investigation into Tuesday's shooting of an undocumented immigrant in Magnolia Park. I'm Craig Cohen. Today on Houston Matters, the politics behind those calls as, once again, immigration enforcement tactics and violence rise to the top of our discourse, this time over a shooting in our own backyard.
Houston Matters with Craig Cohen is a production of Houston Public Media with support from Baylor College of Medicine.
We'll discuss the politics of immigration enforcement with Nancy Sims, political science lecturer at the University of Houston. We'll also talk with her about President Trump's comments about Iran and, yes again, Greenland at a NATO summit today, the dramatic turns in the U.S. Senate race in Maine, and the latest in politics closer to home. We'll start with a news update from NPR and News 88.7. Stay with us.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. President Trump is threatening another round of attacks against Iran.
We hit him very hard last night, very, very hard. Probably hit him hard again tonight. I'll give him a little warning, we're going to hit him hard tonight.
Speaking at the NATO summit in Turkey, Trump declared the U.S. ceasefire with Iran over after the two sides exchanged airstrikes across the Middle East overnight.
I think it's over. I don't want to deal with them anymore. They're scum. You know what scum is? They're scum. They're sick people. They're led by sick people. And they're vicious, violent people. And if they had a nuclear weapon, they'd use it.
The price of oil rose about 6% after Trump's comments on Iran, climbing to $78 per barrel. That's the highest level in more than 2 weeks. Stocks on Wall Street opened sharply lower this morning after renewed fighting between the U.S. and Iran. NPR's Scott Horsley reports the Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 530 points in early trading.
Crude oil prices jumped after President Trump declared an end to the shaky ceasefire with Iran. The U.S. launched strikes against dozens of targets along the Iranian coast in retaliation for attacks on several ships trying to cross the Strait of Hormuz. The renewed fighting could put more upward pressure on domestic energy prices. AAA says retail gas prices rose less than a penny a gallon overnight. A springtime spike in jet fuel prices has been costly for U.S. airlines. Newly released government figures show U.S. carriers spent more than $6 billion on jet fuel during the month of May. That's an 84% increase from the same month a year ago. Asian stocks were mixed overnight, down in Tokyo, Seoul, and Shanghai, but up in Hong Kong. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
Health officials in Gaza say airstrikes carried out by Israel have killed at least 8 Palestinians. NPR's Anas Baba reports the victims included 2 children and an official from an Egyptian aid group.
Health officials say Israeli airstrikes across Gaza killed 8 Palestinians on Tuesday at a time when thousands were watching Egypt play against Argentina in the World Cup. Those killed included 2 brothers ages 10 and 8. And an official with the Egyptian Relief Committee operating in Gaza. The aid organization says Mohammed al-Wahidi is its 4th official killed during the ceasefire. The Israeli military says it struck a Hamas operative traveling in a vehicle in northern Gaza and that it's reviewing reports that civilians were harmed. According to health officials, 1,080 Palestinians have been killed during the ceasefire in Gaza. Anas Baba, NPR News, Gaza.
A massive wildfire in southern Colorado continues to burn after destroying hundreds of homes and other buildings. Firefighters across the West are working to contain other large fires in Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, and Washington. This is NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Melville Charitable Trust, committed to ensuring all people have a safe, stable, and affordable home that allows them to thrive. Information about ways to prevent and solve homelessness is at melvilletrust.org.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Matt Harab. Multiple elected officials are calling for an independent investigation into the shooting death of an undocumented immigrant in the Magnolia Park area yesterday. An Immigration and Customs Enforcement agent shot and killed Lorenzo Salgado Araujo after they say he attempted to ram an ICE law enforcement vehicle with his car. Immigrant rights groups are disputing that claim. News 88.7's Tom Perumian is at the scene where he's been speaking to people in the community this morning. Good morning, Tom.
And good morning, Matt. Speaking with two sisters here in the Memorial Park area, confirm Immigration and Customs Enforcement are conducting a surge operation and that they've been aided by police. Patricia Cruz is a U.S. citizen who lives in the area.
They are targeting the neighborhood. My sister got stopped a couple of weeks ago, and they just ran into her like she was a criminal, and that's not right. That's not right. We're being targeted.
Both were surrounded in the car by ICE officers until they produced proper identification as naturalized American citizens. Now, Tuesday's shooting of a long-term undocumented immigrant is going to be the subject of a press conference in North Houston. That gets going at 10 o'clock this morning. From the Canal Street Memorial to Lorenzo Salgado Araujo, I'm Tom Perumian, News 88.7.
All right, Tom, the FBI is leading the investigation into what happened. Harris County Attorney Abby Kamen, Harris County Commissioner Rodney Ellis, Democratic Harris County Judge candidate Letitia Plummer, Houston City Council member Alejandra Salinas, and U.S. Representative Sylvia Garcia are all among those calling for an independent investigation into what happened. Stay here. We'll have more on the political implications of this story just ahead on Houston Matters. Meanwhile, Harris County Public Health says it's confirmed 18 cases of cyclospora in our region. That is the stomach bug associated with a parasite outbreak that has sickened hundreds of people around the country. The illness has been linked to not washing fresh produce. Harris County Public Health is urging people to take extra care of their food, especially when outside. I'm Matt Harab, News 88.7.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. Good morning. Thanks for joining us here on News 88.7 and Houston Public Media's YouTube channel. Coming up this hour, a new study suggests much higher rates of homelessness in the Houston area than previously measured, but that's likely because it defines homelessness differently. Also, heat and work, and behind the scenes of Texas Southern's aviation program. First, though, elected officials and immigrant rights organizations are calling for an independent investigation into Tuesday's shooting of an undocumented immigrant in Magnolia Park. An ICE agent shot and killed Lorenzo Salgado Araujo after the federal agency said Araujo attempted to ram an ICE vehicle with his car. Immigrant rights groups dispute that claim. Houston area Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia echoes LULAC's call for evidence to be preserved and released, including body cam, dash cam, and bystander videos. While the FBI is leading a federal investigation, Harris County Attorney Abby Kamen, Harris County Commissioner Rodney Ellis, Democratic Harris County Judge candidate Letitia Plummer, and Houston City Council member Alejandra Salinas have all called for an independent probe. And once again, immigration enforcement tactics and violence rise to the top of our political discourse, this time over a shooting in our own backyard. To discuss the politics of that and other developments in today's political roundup, we're joined now by University of Houston political science lecturer Nancy Sims. Nancy, good morning.
Good morning, Craig.
The calls from elected officials for an independent investigation so far are coming from Democrats. Is it fair to say there is no trust from these officials and candidates of ICE, the FBI, pretty much the rest of the Trump administration?
I agree completely that trust is limited, but I think it's more than just Democratic elected officials. I think we as a society at large have witnessed ICE shootings and seen much video, and we don't have any trust of their version of events. And so I suspect this story will unfold over the next few days, and as we collect and gather more video footage, we'll find out if the ICE version of the story is accurate. But they have previously, we've all been witness to previous ICE shootings they're saying one version, and when the video's released, it's actually a different story.
What we do know so far, surveillance video from nearby businesses show the moments before what ICE claims happened, and there is video after Araujo was shot. So far, though, I'm not aware of video being released either supporting or challenging what federal officials say happened in between, as has been the case before.
Yeah, well, it's less than 24 hours. So
Yeah.
are we just at the 24-hour mark? So I think you'll begin to see more video releases over the next 24 hours. And is that not official, but just as we saw in Minnesota shootings, there'll be video from other places that emerges. As you said, some of the area businesses had door cams, doorbell cams, and people who saw the event that may not have wanted to come forward, but will release it to LULAC representatives or someone else. So I think the video evidence will continue to evolve over the next 24 to 48 hours.
And as usually the case in these circumstances, it's a good idea to withhold judgment until you have as much evidence as you can. That is not how our world works, however. You just take a quick look online, and people have dug in their heels already. If you want to believe the official account, you do. And if you don't want to believe the official account, you don't.
Well, again, people don't trust the official accounts because previous official accounts have been disproven.
Right.
And I think that's why you see such a rush to judgment. And I do think the elected officials, they're only asking for clarification. They're asking for factual evidence to be preserved. They're not saying, you didn't do it. They're saying, we need to know what actually happened.
Is it, in your view, only about that, or is ideology part of it too?
Well, there's been quite a bit of buzz about the targeting in certain neighborhoods in Houston in recent weeks. And, of course, Magnolia Park is a long-time Houston neighborhood, deep Latino roots, some immigrant families, but also many long-time Houston families. And I think there was already tension brewing there, so that's being tapped into. And then, again, Craig, you mentioned that it's mostly Democratic officials, but that's who represents those communities. And so it's natural that it's primarily Latino elected officials calling out for clarification, because that's who are the elected officials for that community.
Between ICE and Customs and Border Protection, at least 10 people have been killed and 22 more injured in shooting incidents since the start of the second Trump administration. Unfortunately, the math suggests this will not be the last such incident somewhere before Election Day. If the balance of power were to shift in Washington, if, for instance, Democrats took control of the U.S. House, maybe the Senate, how could that change federal reaction to such incidents?
Well, I think you would see a major change if it, not necessarily though, because the Trump administration is in charge for 2 more years. And he has, as president, as our chief executive, complete control over ICE. And the Senate and Congress can call for change. They can mandate change. They held hearings on the Minnesota shootings, but they still can't influence how ICE enforces the law.
So much of the talk about campaigning in recent weeks and months had been about the economy being top of Americans' minds. Could an incident like this spark a shift in what voters prioritize in these now 4 months before Election Day?
Well, I honestly don't think so, Craig. I think ICE and shootings, people have pretty much lined up where they stand on that issue. But I still think the economy will dominate the elections. It's just, and with changes in the Iranian war again today, which I know we're going to discuss shortly, but the stock market this morning's crashing. You know, we're already having huge affordability. Gas prices are going to soar again. And I just think affordability and economy continue to be the dominant factor. I wish I could tell you people cared about more, but bottom line, you and I are paying a lot of money for gas, and so that seems to be the issue that daily affects people the most.
Before we leave this topic behind, we have a couple of comments that have come in about it. I just want to share. These are coming from folks watching our video stream on Houston Public Media's YouTube channel. Noah says, it feels like ICE waited for the World Cup to be over before they made their presence known here in this capacity. And we also have Earl saying ICE hasn't given us any reason to trust them after their actions in the past and the leadership that directs them. Any reaction to either of those comments?
Well, I hadn't made the World Cup connection, but that was very insightful, Noah. That was really insightful. And but I think they're both right. As I say, I think the general citizenry doesn't have a strong trust of ICE.
All right, on to some other political developments. President Trump is at a NATO summit in Turkey today. He said a number of things a couple of different times. I want to go through them one at a time. After the latest round of airstrikes between the U.S. and Iran, he says he considers the ceasefire over. That of the Iranian regime, he says, quote, I don't want to deal with them. They're scum. They're sick people. They're led by sick people, and they're vicious, violent people. The elusive peace prize seems pretty far off at this point. What do you make of this tirade?
Well, I mean, the ceasefire was always on very shaky ground. And what I think has been consistent over the last couple of months as they tried to reach this ceasefire is that President Trump and his team keep saying, we've reached an agreement, and then Iran does not confirm that. And they just had the funeral services for their leader this week, and I think it ratcheted up again anti-American sentiment. And it's not really surprising that they dropped a couple of bombs last night. Meanwhile, President Trump is saying their military's destroyed. Well, if their military's destroyed, they continued to drop bombs, and they targeted 80 U.S. sites across the Middle East. So I think Trump has kind of met his match in this one because he continues to say, it's all done, we've taken care of it, and I've done regime change, and none of it is folding out, which really goes to our earlier discussion. People don't trust what they're hearing anymore.
The president also criticized NATO countries for not supporting the war in Iran, as well as for pushing back against his efforts to take control of Greenland. Again, from a political perspective, these would not seem to be the major priorities for most Americans.
You know, Trump wants out of NATO, and he's very frank about the subject of he doesn't think anybody pulls their weight but him. And he's brought the Greenland idea back up. It kind of went on the back burner there for a little while, but here we go again. And that's not something NATO is going to support, nor was it surprising that they didn't engage in the Iranian war because he didn't ask them till after the fact. If you plan to engage a large-level war, then you talk to your allies ahead of time. You don't go drop the bombs and then ask for their help.
He also spoke at a news conference this morning about Ukraine. You watched it. What did he have to say?
I watched a good portion of it. They were still going strong when you and I started. But I was a little stunned how he kept saying, I'm going to get Putin on board. I'm going to get Putin on board. And still taking the side that Russia is worthy of some gain from this war. And I think, he was sitting next to Zelensky, and Zelensky was just quiet for the most part. And he wouldn't really engage him in answering the questions reporters were asking, etc. I didn't sense that he has a huge investment in resolving that war.
In election news, if Democrats are going to have any shot at taking majority control of the U.S. Senate, a key race could be in Maine, where Democratic candidate Graham Platner faces mounting calls to drop out of the race against incumbent Republican Senator Susan Collins. This pressure comes after allegations from his former girlfriend that Platner sexually assaulted her. He already had been trying to navigate a number of questions about his past and his character. What happens next?
I have to say that I think the heat is escalated. He'd overcome a couple of previous charges that people went ahead and stood by him, but this latest allegation and this woman is quite believable. I happened to catch an interview with her last night, and she's strong. And I think we began to see endorsements falling away. I believe 12 Democratic senators withdrew their endorsement of him. And so what's going to happen, I think, is they're going to encourage him to drop out of the race and try to find a replacement. But he's in deep water, and it's unfortunate. I think he's getting caught on a lot of issues that he just wasn't vetted well.
What's happening here in the U.S. Senate race between Democrat James Talarico and Republican Ken Paxton?
Such an interesting summer, Craig. I really thought post-primary runoff that we'd see Paxton unify the party and really hit the ground running, because he has to heal the wounds within his own party. He has to raise a boatload of money because Talarico had free fundraising ride while Cornyn and Paxton were fighting it out. And the opposite has happened. He has not been engaging. He spent the 4th of July in Europe, and he does not have a whole lot of money in his bank account as of the June 30th filings. Meanwhile, Talarico has $30 million in his running consistent ads. As you know, I'm a huge Astros fan, so I watch the games. If I'm not attending them, I'm watching them. And I've been seeing his ads during the Astros games consistently. And they're about affordability. They're not attacking Paxton. They're just good, clean ads of who he is. And I'm just fascinated that Paxton's campaign hasn't elevated up 2 or 3 levels. I hope we see that soon.
The FIFA World Cup matches in Houston are over. The Fan Fest continues another week and a half, but already a lot of signage around town is being packed away. What is your impression about politically whether it was worth it for Houston to be a host city this year?
Well, I think image-wise, it was great. It was great, to have the world talk about Houston and to have the countries that we hosted here. I'm not sure it was great for the Houston economy. I think expectations were very high that everybody'd make money from FIFA being in town. But as I've talked to restaurateurs, hoteliers, Uber drivers, I'm not hearing that. I'm not hearing that people were successful in generating revenue that was anticipated.
Nancy Sims is a political science lecturer at the University of Houston. Nancy, thank you very much.
Thank you, Craig.
Up next, why a new study measures homelessness differently as Houston Matters continues on News 88.7 and YouTube.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from...
You count on Houston Public Media. That's why you're here right now. Take the next step and become a new member today. Every gift makes a difference. And with a gift of $5 a month or more, you'll receive PBS Passport, a member benefit that lets you stream more of the shows you love anytime. It only takes a minute to make a big difference. Join as a new member today at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 800-364-8300.
150 weather monitoring stations to improve storm response and restore power more quickly, helping to build a more resilient coastal grid for the hurricane season.
Support comes from Rice University's Moody Center for the Arts, presenting Summer Jam, an afternoon of art activities featuring an indoor farmers market, live DJ, outdoor games, and more. Saturday, July 18th at 5 p.m. moody.rice.edu.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. A new study's out from Rice University's Kinder Institute, which suggests far larger numbers of people in Greater Houston are homeless than previously accounted for, in no small part because the study may be redefining the term. Dan Potter is director of the Houston Population Research Center at the Kinder Institute. Dan, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Sure. You report about 141,000 people in the region experienced temporary homelessness over the last year. Your definition may be very different from what we normally talk about. You're including people staying with family or in hotels, as well as those living for whatever period of time in their cars. This is in addition to people on the street or in shelters or other traditional ways of defining the term. Why? What are you trying to get across?
Yeah, so one of the things when we think about the Coalition for the Homeless's point-in-time estimate is they're very much focused on streets and shelters. What we wanted to do was recognizing that when we talk about temporary homelessness, that housing instability, that is affecting people, not just those on the street, but those folks that are finding that thing. They cannot afford that rent anymore. So they got to live somewhere. And so they're doubling up. They're in the hotels, motels, potentially in their cars as well.
Does your study include Houstonians who, for instance, may stay with family while they're closing on a new home, or those who stay in upscale extended stay hotels while they're settling on a new lease? In other words, do you filter out those who, by your definition, are temporarily homeless but can afford not to be?
Yes. So a couple things that we were doing here. We removed students from this, knowing that students sometimes have flexible housing arrangements that they're dealing with. That's not necessarily homelessness, but is that sort of temporary moving between spaces. And then we also did not ultimately include people making over $50,000 in these estimates. Not that folks making over $50,000 are not experiencing their own challenges around housing affordability, but at a certain level, there are options that people have so that if they were choosing, as you had mentioned, choosing to stay with family or perhaps getting some sort of an extended stay in certain locations, that was different than the concept that we were trying to attach.
You mentioned income. Are there any other breakdowns, demographic trends worth noting in this?
So we looked at things by age and saw that even after removing students, there were younger adults more likely to experience this. And we also saw higher rates among Black and Hispanic residents than we did among white and Asian residents.
Are there any particular indications of why Houstonians are most likely to end up staying with family or friends or temporarily in hotels or sleeping in their cars or whatever else you measure?
Yeah, so when we were asking folks to help us understand housing affordability challenges, the two main things that came to our attention were utility bills as well as just day-to-day expenses. Thinking about food, groceries, childcare, transportation. When these types of bills are showing up, people have that rent check, people have that mortgage payment, but when that $350 electric bill shows up, when that, $300 grocery shopping bill has to, come due, these are the types of things that are really creating instability for people. And so, built up over time, those can be the things that start causing people to miss rent, ultimately shoving people out of their housing.
If we measured temporary homelessness like this across the country, how do you think it would change the conversation surrounding policies about how to address it?
Yeah, a challenge here is this is invisible. A lot of this homelessness is going to be invisible. We're not going to see it on our way to work in the morning. It's not under the overpasses. It is in people's homes. It's in the motels, but it's still impacting people and their lives, including the children that are involved here. This definition is actually not something that Kinder is coming up with. This is following on the McKinney-Vento Act, which is what our school districts use in the Houston area to understand homelessness and the impacts that has on the students' populations that they're serving. And so, this is something that other entities and sectors are already thinking about in terms of its importance for understanding housing stability. But again, it can become challenging to address because if I stop someone from experiencing temporary homelessness, I wasn't going to see it necessarily in the first place, and now I'm just not seeing it at all. It's still worth addressing and attacking because these things, again, have implications for educational attainment. They have impacts on economic mobility. They have health impacts. And so while it might be invisible, it's still meaningful.
Dan Potter is director of the Houston Population Research Center at the Kinder Institute for Public Policy at Rice University. Dan, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And just ahead, what steps should be taken for those who work in Houston's often oppressive summer heat? As Houston Matters continues on News 88.7 and YouTube.
We are down to the final stretch.
It's not just your car. It's the one that brought your kids home from school, took you cross-country, held memories, laughter, even a few breakdowns. When it's time to let go, give your car a new purpose. Donate it and turn memories into meaningful support for this station. Plus, you'll enjoy free and easy pickup, potential tax benefits, and a simple donation process. Your gift supports the programs you and your family love. Donate today and help keep public media strong. Call or donate online.
News and information from around the world and across the street. Trusted journalists keeping you connected by keeping you informed. Search HPM Plus on your smart and connected TVs and stay informed.
Support comes from Southwest Woman Care OBGYN, providing care for women of all ages, including well woman exams, pregnancy care, menopause care, and fibroid treatment in a multilingual setting. More at swobgyn.com.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. Well, we've reached that point in the summer. For the next few months, we can expect heat, humidity, and occasional storms, of course. Back in 2024, when Beryl rolled through, it left hundreds of thousands of Houstonians without power for days, enduring dangerous summer heat and humidity without AC. Thousands of utility crews, first responders, construction workers, landscapers, and others had to keep working outside in those extreme conditions. It also happened then amid a growing national conversation about protecting workers from dangerous heat. Texas lawmakers had passed a bill the year before to prevent cities like Houston from requiring water breaks for construction workers. In July of 2024, OSHA proposed the nation's first major federal rule aimed at protecting workers from heat-related illness on the job. Amid all of that, Houston Matters producer Mincho Jacob spoke with Kevin Lanza, assistant professor of environmental science at UTHealth Houston, about the physical and mental health effects of extreme heat and whether the proposed federal rule would go far enough to protect workers.
Heat affects you on a spectrum. So on the less severe side of the spectrum, it can be anywhere from discomfort, right, to irritation of your skin, so a heat rash, or it could be heat cramp. So it could be muscle spasms or pains. Yet if your core body temperature reaches higher levels, so our body is able to keep our temperatures around 97 and 99 degrees Fahrenheit, and that is on purpose for all of our systems to run at their best. But if temperatures that we're experiencing, that could be inside or outside, in addition to our physical activity level, those two things raise our core body temperature, where if it gets to about 101 to 103 degrees Fahrenheit internally, that's when you are at risk of heat exhaustion. So that's a more severe heat illness than heat cramps and skin irritation. What that is it could be dizziness, it could be profuse sweating, severe discomfort, maybe even vomiting. It could be more intense muscle cramps, etc. And when that happens, you're told to remove yourself from that activity that's causing it, and removing yourself from those high temperatures one is experiencing. And so find a cool place and stop being active, and then start sipping water and cooling yourself off. If one doesn't remove themselves from these poor conditions and this level of activity, then that could progress to heat stroke. And that's a medical emergency. That's where there's a risk of death. And that's where you can have permanent damage to your different organs, including your heart, your brain, your kidneys, for instance. This also has some neurological problems as symptoms. So you could have agitation and confusion, and you could pass out. And in these instances, if you see someone who's experiencing these symptoms, you immediately call for medical responders, and you try to cool them off as quickly as possible. And what they recommend is a neck and below cool water bath. Or it could be what places like Arizona have been starting to do, which are like ice cocoons, where people are put in these kind of more or less body bags to just immediately cool themselves off. They don't actually recommend drinking water when one has reached heat stroke, because it could go down the wrong pipe, if you will, and cause some issues.
So, Kevin, you said that your body can't really handle getting to an internal temperature of 103 degrees, but what do you do when it's really hot out, like 110 or 115? And really, even an outdoor temperature of 93 degrees might affect you because it feels like 110. We hear that now in weather forecasts, the feels like temperature or the heat index. There's also the wet bulb globe temperature that's mentioned by organizations like the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, or NIOSH. Can you parse out these temperature measurements a little bit?
Yes, great question. All of these different measures that you hear, air temperature, heat index, wet bulb globe temperature, these are all what we just call heat stress metrics. These are all getting at the same thing, the level of stress one would experience from heat, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference is that they each incorporate different elements of weather. So air temperature is a heat stress metric, which is a singular element. It's only air temperature. That is very well understood by the average person because you see it in our weather forecasts. You have thermometers. It's something you're taught in school. Yet that doesn't tell the full story. So heat index is a combination term that is not only air temperature, but also relative humidity. And that is what we call the feels like temperature. And you also see those on our weather forecasts. And those are becoming closer to universal now, not, I think, as well understood as air temperature by itself still. And then wet bulb globe temperature is another direct environmental measure, just like air temperature and relative humidity and heat index, where it incorporates 4 different weather elements. One is air temperature, second is relative humidity, third is wind speed, and fourth is radiation. So think about when you're walking outside and the air around you, how hot it feels. That's the air temperature plus the humidity level, because if it feels heavy and your sweat's not evaporating as readily, that's where you can be at risk of heat inhalts. That's why we include relative humidity, because our number one way our body cools itself is the evaporation of sweat. But when the air is heavy and there's more water in it, then sweat doesn't as readily evaporate and we can't cool ourselves. Wind speed helps to, again, evaporate that sweat. So that's why it's part of this wet bulb globe temperature as a heat stress metric. And then the important one is radiation, because if you're walking around and not in the shade, that sun hitting you is actually heating you up. And so that is an important element to incorporate when we think about heat stress. The only problem is people, when they hear a wet bulb globe temperature reading, it's not easy to interpret. We don't know the scale as the public. If you tell someone it's 100 degrees outside air temperature, everyone knows what that means. But if you tell someone it's like 85 degrees wet bulb temperature, that is confusing.
Right. And I know some readings last year here in Houston, we definitely were above 90 degrees in the wet bulb globe temperature, which is extreme as I understand it, right? You should not be working after beyond like 15 minutes. You need to take big breaks, but that's not something that's easily parsed out. And there's no forecast for that, right? Like you can't just look up what your wet bulb globe temperature is for your area, right?
Exactly. There's these very specific types of sensors that can calculate or estimate each of these 4 elements that make up wet bulb globe temperature, yet it isn't something that is utilized by our National Weather Service at scale.
I want to get a little bit more into those new OSHA rules. Basically, they're saying at 80 degrees, if you're a new employee working in the heat, you would have to have like this period of time to acclimate. And then at 90 degrees, certain breaks and water things set in. But it's a little unclear if it's like if they're just talking about air temperature or if it is like a wet bulb globe temperature.
From my look at it, it looks like it's a heat index. So there's initial heat trigger, heat index of 80 and above, or wet bulb globe temperature equal to the NIOSH recommended action limit. And there's a high heat trigger. And that's, again, heat index of 90 degrees Fahrenheit or wet bulb globe temperature equal to the NIOSH recommended exposure limit. So it seems like they're completely resting on our more advanced heat stress metrics beyond just simply air temperature.
Which is a good thing, right? To be on that new metric, which is a little bit more real, especially when you're talking about humidity and radiation and all these other things that affect your ability to sweat properly, right?
Yeah, because they're completely tied to our physiology. What this does is it provides a larger safety net that is unequivocally going to improve the safety and livelihood of the people doing work in indoor and outdoor settings that may be exposed to high temperatures. It's a starting point, but it's a very thoughtful starting point that those who created it are surely going to iterate upon as we gain new information as to how it works.
As it gets hotter, if we're constantly hitting these temperatures, should work be happening? Should people be outside at all? I know that you hear recommendations like you shouldn't go outside today, but that's not a reality for all people, right?
What's exciting about these proposed standards is that they're going to be mandatory and they are at the national level. And so this means any kind of policies underneath it, they still have to be held to this level of regulation, right? And another exciting piece is that each of these thresholds and the guidelines as to what to do and when, for instance, the mandatory rest breaks of 15 minutes at least every 2 hours, these are all steeped on our best available scientific evidence. So they're just not made up in thin air. Yet I also think that the group that has come up with these guidelines, which is going to be a smattering of folks across different fields, they fully acknowledge that these are a preliminary regulation. As with any regulations, as they go into practice, we're going to learn quite a bit of things, positively and negatively, that we're going to have to iterate on. So this is by no means going to be the final regulation that's going to be out there for decades. This is something that, for the time being, with the evidence we have, these are our best rules we can put into play.
Right. And what should we be thinking of, like, as far as like a society, as governance? I mean, we have energy grid issues here in Texas as well.
Right.
So what else should we be thinking policy wise, or just as society, as citizens, people living our day to day, to protect ourselves as things get higher? Is there anything else we should be thinking of to keep ourselves safe, or to be able to deal with the possibility of having a heat related illness?
Yeah. I mean, the forecasted future climate is, we can't even say it's the new normal, because it's going to become more intense. So it's not even what it is now. It's increasing in time. What the researchers mostly focus on, and for good reason, is the impact of heat on heat-related illness and death, because heat leads to more deaths than all other weather-related hazards, and that's expected to increase with time. It's also fully acknowledged that we grossly underreport the number of heat-related illness and death, and that's just based on our standards and criteria we use or don't use to do that reporting, and how it's different by the 3,000 counties across the U.S.
Right.
But what I would invite people to think about is the long-term impacts of heat on health that are separate from heat-related illness and mortality. How does heat impact everyone's everyday behaviors, especially their health behaviors? So what we found in our research is that extreme heat has been serving as a barrier to people engaging in healthy levels of physical activity. And we know that being physically active lowers the risk of cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, improves sleep quality, lowers stress levels. And so we already spend also over 90% of our time indoors. And we are also in an epidemic of loneliness and social isolation. And so these high temperatures could continue to keep people inside and away from others. And so it could lead to a lot of effects beyond what's happening at the workplace or during work hours. We conducted a qualitative study with mostly Latina women from low-income households in Austin.
Mm-hmm.
And what several of them said was that their husbands worked in outdoor construction, but when they came home, they were tired and they weren't in the mood to engage with their household. And so that's showcasing the cascading effects of extreme heat beyond the work hours. And I don't think that these new guidelines take into account the effects of heat outside of the workplace and outside of the individual in that position or job.
Wow, that's a really intense and interesting perspective on how heat can affect your life beyond just a physical effect. But if a person has no choice but to be out in the heat, how can they feel as comfortable as possible and be safe while working?
Wear loose-fitting, light-colored clothing, drink cool water, take breaks, and find a cool area away from your work conditions. Maybe it also includes taking a break from being active, if your job especially has active moments. But then one exciting piece that has been part of occupational health for a while is following an acclimatization schedule. So this is where you build up tolerance to heat by gradually exposing yourself to high temperature conditions and also engaging in the activity level that you are trying to acclimatize towards or trying to become tolerant of. And so this typically takes about 1 to 2 weeks, 2 weeks to become fully acclimatized. And then once you finish those 2 weeks, your body is going to be better able to respond to high temperatures, and you're going to be objectively safer working in those conditions. And there may be some thermal comfort benefits where you feel better while you're doing the work. The only thing is, if you don't use it, then you lose it. So just because you become acclimatized, you have to continue to expose yourself and be at that level of activity that you acclimatize towards to maintain that level of heat tolerance. So if you don't continue to engage in that level of activity in that level of temperature, then within about a month, you lose the acclimatization that you had gained.
Kevin Lanza is an assistant professor of environmental science at UTHealth Houston. He spoke with Houston Matters' Mincho Jacob in 2024. Still to come, more Mincho. He visits TSU's aviation program and hangar at Ellington. Stay with us as Houston Matters continues on News 88.7 and YouTube.
One year ago, Houston Public Media.
We know you value Houston Public Media. That's why you're watching right now. So take the next step and become a new member of the station you rely on. Every gift makes a difference. And what matters most right now is supporting the station that brings you the news and information you rely on. It only takes a minute to make a big difference. So join as a new member today at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 800-364-8300.
Sunforce Ocean Life, an immersive exhibition exploring ecology, spirituality, and sensory awareness. The experience ends September 7th. Tickets at mfah.org.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from listeners like you and from Baylor College of Medicine. With over 125 years of innovation behind it, Baylor has driven progress in health and medicine through research, education, and care that push the frontiers of modern science.
Texas Southern University's aviation program has come a long way in 8 years. From one plane and curriculum built practically from scratch to an accredited flight school that now partners with aircraft manufacturer Cirrus and is housed at a satellite campus at Houston's spaceport at Ellington, where it has its own hangar, its own fuel tank, and classrooms as well. Houston Matters' Mincho Jacob visited the facility for a tour with Kelsey White, aviation program office manager.
So this, as you see, is our hangar. This is our $5 million hangar. This is the lab that the students fly from. We have our aircraft that fit in here. We have 12 aircraft. We also have a brand new twin-engine aircraft that was just delivered. And we also have our own fuel farm. We do maintenance out of here. As you can see, in the distance to the right, a fuel tank. This is the first of its kind. We've made history by commissioning our fuel tank, which means our students are able to fuel their own aircraft. It saves not only the university money, but it also gives students the experiences that they need for real world. This one is a little Mr. Titus, who does our safety. He actually is doing some maintenance on the aircraft. And then we have our other ones. We see a student that's just come in. He's going to be flying to Austin later on today. So the students can fly. One of them is flying to Monroe, Louisiana. One of them is flying to Austin. So they get their hours here. So when they graduate, they can go directly to United, with whom we have a partnership, Delta, Southwest Airlines, and Republic Airways. So we're tracking the students from a freshman student to going directly into being a professional pilot.
That's Kelsey White, TSU Aviation Program Office Manager. She spoke with our Mincho Jacob. TSU's aviation program is led by Dr. Terrence Fontaine, a retired Marine and Continental Airlines engineer, pilot, and instructor. He was also once then Houston Mayor Bill White's chief of staff and an executive at Metro. But as he tells Mincho Jacob, aviation is in his blood.
My father worked for Delta Airlines for 32 years and retired from Delta after 32 years. And as a 5, 6-year-old, 7-year-old kid in the summertime, you know, things have changed so much. You used to be able to go to work with your parents if you wanted to, no big deal. And so in the summertime when I was out of school, I'd go and get dressed and go with my dad to the airport. And I'd be at the airport all day, smelling those jet fumes and seeing the pilots walk through and out there with the maintenance guys and all that. So I kind of grew up around aviation as a kid. So there was really nothing else I ever wanted to do than become an airline pilot. The problem was there weren't any black airline pilots when I was 6 years old. And so it was nobody I could really emulate. And so my father never really listened to me when I said I wanted to become a pilot. He always wanted me to become an aircraft mechanic because he knew that's something that I could do and something that wouldn't be challenged and probably something I'd be pretty good at doing. What changed my life was the Marine Corps. When I went to the Marine Corps, my job was aviation operations. And so one of my jobs was to basically do these things called Flight Readiness Evaluation Data Sheets. They call them FREDs, and which means I'm hanging out with pilots all day. Well, guess what? Everything my father told me about these guys being so smart, I'm going, wait a minute. Are you serious? And that's when I started flying because I thought I wasn't good enough. So the next thing I know, I'm taking lessons and doing my thing. And And I made it all the way through commercial and all that, up to airline transport pilot. And you know, I flew the Embraer 145, went to 777 school, went to captain school when I was at Continental in 1998, and became a pilot and a pilot instructor. But the eventuality of that happened as a result of being in a situation where I knew just by being around a certain environment that I was capable. What happens to a lot of minority kids is they never reach the opportunity because just like me, people are telling them they can't do it or whatever, or they think it's so far-fetched for them to do, they never try and get there. It's just that I had that opportunity in the Marine Corps to literally tell my dad, you were wrong. You know, what you heard was wrong. It is something that folks can do. You just got to realize that you can do it and be around an environment to show that.
There's so many programs, right? For, like saying, minority kids, black, brown kids, you know, learn how to be a mechanic, learn how to do this, learn how to work cleaning up society, right? Yeah. But not really like be the pilot, be a president, be this. Yeah. But this program looks a lot different. How did this come to be?
When I got here, we owned no airplanes and we had no instructors, no flight instructors. My first 2 years at Texas Southern, I can tell you the door was closed and I did weep. I'm not lying to you. I actually cried, I don't know how many times. It was not good. Students weren't happy. Program wasn't really taking off the way it should. You had some very frustrated students who had signed up to come to Texas Southern and really weren't flying as much as they should. It was not going well.
So what all do you offer? You have folks that are trying to be a pilot?
We have a management program, which is a 4-year degree, and people end up, and it's either air traffic controllers or airport operations officers like myself, or they may work for an airline. They could go to United or Delta or American or Republic or whatever, or Southwest, right? And then we have a drone program, which is a very young program compared to the two I'm speaking of, and it's getting on its feet. But it's a drone program where folks can earn a bachelor's degree in unmanned aerial systems, UAS. So those are the 3 concentrations.
And so how did you do? I mean, Texas Southern struggles with financing, like all schools, but especially HBCUs and
so this is where the blessings come in.
Right.
I convinced them to spend a little money and buy a $90,000 airplane. The provost, he bought it. Then we won a contest from Cessna, and they gave us a brand new airplane to fly around for 9 months, hoping that we'd buy it. We didn't have no money to buy an airplane. Anyway, we ended up with 3 airplanes, and that's kind of how we started, by owning. We could not do any of this without owning our own airplanes first. Southwest Airlines was the first one to step up and say, look, we'll partner with you guys. And so their Destination 225 program helped us kind of accelerate a little bit. Next thing you know, there's this thing called ABBI. It's called the Aviation Accreditation Board International. The best of the best, the Embry-Riddles, the Purdue's, the Kansas State, Western Michigans, they all are ABBI-accredited, okay? And I was told, let's just say by a few institutions, you don't worry about that, don't do that. You know, it's just a lot of money and a lot of time, it doesn't get you any return. But I'm figuring, look, if the eventuality is we're gonna be one of the best in the country, you gotta get this accreditation. No matter how much time it takes, no matter what it costs, this is what we got to do. So we started down a 2-year path of becoming accredited. And let me tell you, that was tough. But we did get accredited, and once we got accredited, everything changed. Now, United Aviate comes. Now, Republic comes and others. And now students began to come to the program in droves. Our enrollment just started taking off. We've had record enrollment every year. This is going to be another banner year. I just got off the phone with 11 more students who all want to come to Texas Southern. So it's going crazy. But we did that systematically. And the blessings come in these waves. So here's what I want you to understand. We have a brand new fleet of airplanes. We have a brand new hangar. We have a brand new office building here that we're doing this interview in. We have a brand new twin engine that just showed up 3 weeks ago, right? We got brand new simulators coming to Texas Southern University in the fall. Guess how much money we owe? 0.
How'd you do that?
We had a donor, an anonymous donor, who remains anonymous, who literally saw our program on a news release. He's an alumnus of the university and gave us the money to buy new airplanes. With the help of the state of Texas, the governor's office, and people like Boris Miles, Yolanda Jones, those type folks who were in session at that time, Carol Alvarado, these people helped us at the state of Texas be able to get another $5 million. Before Sylvester Turner passed away, when he was mayor of the city of Houston, one of the last things he did was put it through city council to build this facility that we're now renting, okay? And John Whitmire came behind him as mayor and ratified it. And so that's why we're sitting here. You're looking at, roughly $17 million of money that literally flowed into this university's aviation program without really anyone asking for a dime.
I remember distinctly like 10 years ago coming off a flight, and it was a black pilot, and so many families were taking pictures with the pilot. I mean, it was that rare still, right, to see a black pilot, like, unfortunately, and it's like you think we've come so far, but
we had a lady get off an airplane. I was actually the co-pilot on this airplane. The captain was African American. I was young pilot, and a lady gets on the airplane, and she literally walked to the cockpit and turned in. She goes, "Where are the pilots?" And we're like, "Hey, ma'am, we're naive. We're the pilots." And she goes, "No." I go, "Yes, ma'am." And she tells the flight attendant, she goes, "What time's the next flight?" This woman's, her bag, this is how crazy sometimes racism can be, right? This lady's bags were already on the airplane. So she literally got off the airplane because she didn't want to fly with two black pilots, okay? And her bags were gone without her. So that's how crazy. I mean, and then, it's funny because how sad it is. But we sat there, he and I kind of sat there and laughed about it, like, how can you be that stupid to get off an airplane? I mean, think about it like this. There's no affirmative action in becoming an airline pilot. Every single pilot, white, black, woman, man, it doesn't matter. Guess what? You got to get past the FAA. I don't care who you are, okay? And knowing that you're African American or a minority in any facet or whatever, do you think that they're going to give anybody a break? The FAA? The answer is not no, but no, right? And so I promise you, who's ever up there flying that airplane, if they look anything like me, or let's just make it simple, even a female pilot, trust me, they're not only qualified, but let me just say, I'll leave it at this, they're extremely qualified. Trust me on that. And then don't forget that even after you become a pilot, you still have to go back through what's referred to as recurrent training. Every single captain that's flying out there, no matter what color you are, every 6 months or 9 months, depending on the airline, you have to recertify yourself. You got to go to the doctor, get your eyes checked, your blood pressure. All these things have to happen every 6 months or 9 months for a captain. Then they put you in the simulator, and guess what? You still have to perform engine out takeoff. You still have to do a rejected takeoff by the letter of the law. You still have to do a rapid decompression. You still got to do an engine fire. You still have to do these memory items. And if you don't do those things well, no matter what color you are, guess what they're going to do? They're going to ground you until you get your act together and can get back on the line. So it's asinine for anybody to believe that that person, whoever it is up in that cockpit, is not on their P's and Q's and have done everything possible to get there. So when we go about training these students, I don't allow caps. I don't do ear pods in the classroom. We don't do any of that at Texas Southern University. When you enter the professional pilot program at Texas Southern, you're entering a professional pilot program. And so you start acting like, reading like, studying like, training like, that you're going to be a professional pilot from day one.
Terrence Fontaine is Executive Director of Aviation at TSU. He spoke with our Mincho Jacob. And that'll do it for today's show. The Houston Matters team includes Michael Haggerty, Joshua Zinn, Brenda Valdivia, Mincho Jacob, and Laura Walker. Jared Carroll's our technical director. On tomorrow's show, private schools used to serve as the alternative for parents who wanted religion as a part of their kids' education. As recent state policies and curriculum inject Bible stories, the Ten Commandments, and other Christian materials into public school classrooms, we may be seeing a reversal. Other parents leaving public for private in order to get away from religious teaching. We'll discuss. Also, former NPR host David Green joins us. I'm Craig Cohen. Join us tomorrow for those and other Houston Matters.
A year ago, one of the deadliest floods in U.S. history tore through the Texas Hill Country. Since then, we've been following up with survivors.
Everything is gone.
And people who lost loved ones.
I find myself just shaking my head saying, I can't believe I find myself here.
You can hear their stories on the podcast After the Flood.